Hello and welcome to my YouTube channel. In today's episode of the series of upgrading this 120 square metre carbon footprint to being an A-rated family home, let's look at generating our own solar electricity. Let's get into it.
Like many out there, we've been hit with rising energy costs due to the Russian invasion of Ukraine. We're also conscious that our energy use is having an impact on the climate. So we kind of want to address both the cost of living and also the sustainability of our energy use to sustain our lifestyle. We have a lovely big south-facing roof and we want to put solar PV panels on it. The SEAI in Ireland, they give grants to assist with this, and there's a very good market out there of vendors that are capable of providing those installation services. So the problem statement for us is we want solar PV as much as we can afford / fit on the roof. And we also want to make sure that we make good use of it during the day, and also if it can somehow sustain the energy that we have created, or captured rather, from the sun, to use some of our other loads in the evening as well. Now, from looking around at the costs of battery systems, it would seem that's the logical way to go. We're looking around, it feels like there's profiteering going on in Ireland in the domestic PV battery market, so we're going to defer that for now, but we will enable that we can plug it into our inverter in future. With respect to making use of the energy though, we're coming to understand that there are two types of loads that you can use to make use of your captured PV. You can have controlled loads or uncontrolled loads. So controlled loads would be, for example, the hot water diverter that we installed in episode 1, which captures the solar energy and diverts it to the hot water cylinder. A second one would be, for example, a car charger. And we're also going to add a car charger for our EV to the scope of this project so that we can make use of the captured PV when we're at home and we have the car plugged in. And then there are uncontrolled loads that are energy intensive, and traditionally for cost of running purposes we will run them at night, things like dishwashers or washer dryers for clothes. But as we've been fitting out our new house and we've been getting appliances, we've been choosing ones that have time delay features. So for example, you just press a button and you can delay the start of it so that you can time it for when there's likely to be good sunlight. You can then capture the energy and use it immediately. And for everything else, we're happy to sell it back to the grid. And that's dependent on, in Ireland, on having a smart meter which can quantify your export and having the right tariff with your energy supplier, but that'll come in time. So let's have a look at what options there are out there to install solar PV in a house.
So I went out to 5 different vendors on the market, 3 of whom got back to me, and I got 3 quite competitive quotes, which is always reassuring. First of all, you have 3 to choose from, and also if they're relatively close to each other, at least you have a good understanding of the market rate. The first company that came back, these particular guys, they were offering a Huawei inverter, albeit a 3 kilowatt one. I kind of wanted a bit more capacity, and I did say to them I wanted more capacity because I might want to upgrade in future and add some additional panels at the rear. But however, they also would only offer to fit 9 number panels. I think the solar panels that they were offering, dimensionally, they just wouldn't fit more on my roof. So in terms of cost per kilowatt delivered, so if you do 9359.7 minus 2400 for the SEAI grant, that comes to 6959, and then they were offering basically a 3.64 kilowatt peak connected system, so 3.64 So coming in fitted about €1,912 per kilowatt peak. So that gives kind of grounds of reference of the rough speaking numbers. Moving on, we then went to this particular company. Who were they? Activate, who came recommended actually by more than one person. They were talking about 9149, and I, as far as I recall, that was after grant. So, and I think they were offering a 4 kilowatt peak system, so divided by 4, so that's kind of €2,287. So these guys were €1,900, these guys 2,200. So you can kind of get grounds of reference of what you're looking at. And then ultimately the guys we did go with, AEI, very reasonable salesperson came along. I have a feeling the chap was originally an engineer, which spoke to me. Extremely patient, and he was very probing quite well that we would match our electrical use to make best use of the solar, because he didn't want to sell it and then have us complain that we're not seeing instant savings. It was just a very thoughtful long-term approach, I thought. So they were basically 8.5 after the grant. So 8500 divided by, and what they ended up supplying us was 4.1 kilowatt hours, or kilowatt peak. So that was around €2,073. So a bit more expensive than these guys, but it was a 4 kilowatt system. So it got us the best bang for our buck if you want to maximize the amount of electricity. Also, they were very happy to supply and install a Zappi car charger, which was kind of 2 birds in 1 stone for me. So I ended up going with them. And in terms of the equipment they supplied, these were solar panels themselves. So it's funny, when you buy them, they rate at different rates between 390 watts per panel or 410, and it turns out they were actual 410 watt ones. I looked at the labels on the side of them as they were being installed. And one of the, and you can see kind of dimensionally this is what they look like. And one of the things you kind of have to be careful of when you're ordering these things is, what is their lifetime over time? So over 25 years, you're still going to thereabouts get 84% of the efficacy out of them. So they're not going to have a dramatic drop. These things are always going to drop in efficacy over time. It's just the way that it is. And this is quite reasonable. And like in terms of warranties, I think this one has a 12 years warranty for materials, 25 years warranty for the power output. And I think you'll find once you go through the SEI system, they have requirements on minimum warranties that need to be achieved. And in terms of the inverter we went for, so you can buy a very simple inverter that just takes in DC, converts it to AC, and away you go. We got ours a little bit more sophisticated in 2 ways, which kind of justifies why these guys were a slight bit more expensive than these guys. So these guys were offering a 3 kilowatt inverter, these guys were offering a 5 kilowatt, so it can take additional power through it. It also has the capability to accommodate 2 strings. So I could have a south-facing string, which we have and it's installed, but I could also in future fit a west-facing string of panels. And it means that if the south is in shade, but the west is in sunlight, it'll still generate electricity. You can't mix and match west-facing and south-facing and expect that it'll just work fine. If any one panel is in shade, it knocks down the entire array. So if you have separate strings, it lets you optimize for the different arrangements. And then the second thing is this particular power inverter that we bought, apart from having a completely needless screen, it also has, it's what's known as a hybrid inverter, which lets us tie in a battery in future. So it's future-proofed in that respect. I can go off and I can buy a battery from anyone on eBay, Alibaba, AliExpress, you name it. And as long as it's on the very long list of supported batteries for this Solace, and it can communicate with it, I can use that. So that kind of gives grounds of reference of the price ranges that we're seeing in Ireland, mid to late 2022. So about 1900 to 22 per kilowatt, bearing in mind if you want a hybrid inverter with a dual string. So that's roughly that. If I were to do it again, I would perhaps consider, bearing in mind that I'm going with the whole My Energy, with the My Energy ecosystem, I would look at using, where was it? It was there, the Libby. Just one second. Yeah, Libby. The Libby inverter from My Energy. So that's a combined inverter with battery added onto it. Basically, it was announced 2 days before I got the system installed. But it just means that everything could be controlled in one app rather than having two apps. So it will be an interesting one to look into, although I understand that these are being charged at quite a premium. But it is a nice, neat arrangement. So this is the solar inverter. It's a Solace 5 kilowatt hybrid inverter, and it is surprisingly IP65, so you could put this outdoors if you wanted, which I think is very impressive. It has a nice human machine interface which flickers horribly with the camera, but okay, so it's 5:45 on a November day, so we're not going to get much sunlight. In fact, we're not getting any sunlight right now. And what it does is it tracks the amount of electricity coming in from the grid, how much is being consumed in the house, how much is contributed from the solar, and if we did have a battery, it would show here. We don't have a battery connected yet, but we will get there. And also it seems to have its own AC output to support stuff powered solely from either the solar or the battery, not from the grid at all, although we're not using that functionality. And you can connect in this Wi-Fi module that gives you an app, and you can look at various different settings and see your grid. Over here we've got the incoming DC from the solar array on the roof. This appears to be some sort of a disconnect switch, an automatic disconnect switch from what I can ascertain, and it seems to be tripped off something to do with this fuse spur outlet. I guess if AC to the house is disconnected, it trips this thing off. I suppose as a safety feature so that you can't feed photovoltaic into the grid. You also have a double pole isolator on the DC side, and you can see that it's pre-wired for 2 inputs to the solar inverter, even though we're only actually using one at the moment. And then you've got an isolator on the output back down to the house. So all in all, a very neat install, I must say, by the chaps in AEI. So in terms of using the PV array, so far after about 2 months roughly speaking of it being operational, we've gained some valuable insights, and it's proving to be quite effective. We made the conscious decision we wanted to go with the My Energy ecosystem, and it is useful because it not only records import or export to the grid of solar PV, it also recognizes how much energy is used internally within the house. It recognizes how much is used for hot water heating, which we saw in episode 1, and also how much is used for car charging. So we can very quickly get a sense of some of the larger loads, how effective our strategy at scheduling things is. So they have energy usage here, and they have 3 kind of main screens here. This one is just showing, for example, today, this is how we use energy. So red is what we imported from the grid, and you can see that there's a bump here overnight up to around 4 kilowatts quite consistently. That's the car charging itself. Plus it's the dishwasher working away. And you can see at the end here, the dishwasher, obviously we have this thing timed to operate at night. It does a drying cycle towards the end. And then a heating cycle towards the middle of its program, and a drying cycle towards the end. So it's quite interesting to kind of just get a sense when energy is and why. You can then come along here, and I suspect these little peaks are the old oil boiler just keeping the temperature of the house up. And here you can see the hot water charging up using night rate in preparation for us to have showers. So it's actually quite cool that way, and you can even see the kettle came on. This type of consumption though, it does help you understand, if you summed up the area of all this kind of orange area, it would give you a sense of the size of battery you would require if you were going to do a hybrid inverter with a battery storage, because this is stuff you're never going to recover via solar. You can then see here in the green, this represents what came in on the sun today. Not particularly bright early January day, but it more than adequately dealt with the base load of the house and defrayed the cost to us of importing peak rate electricity, which is excellent. And you can see I came home here and I probably put on I think I put on a wash of clothes and probably boiled the kettle here and ran the toaster there, and you can kind of get a sense. And then you have yellow, which is minuscule, but you can see this is the energy that's exported back out to the grid. So there was no consumption for it locally, so as a last resort it goes out to the grid. So that kind of gives a sense of your energy, and you can then look over the last month, and this probably takes a moment to crunch, and get a sense for your energy consumption and how and where it goes, to just spot trends. And for me, I'm mainly going to use this, number one, to make sure that I'm addressing baseload consumption, because if you have a consistent kind of 300 watts baseload all the time with Wi-Fi routers and fans and things like that, that could add up to like kind of 2,000 kilowatt hours per year, which ain't cheap. But here you can see just this is the rough peak of how energy is used in the house, and you can see on certain days we did have good export out to the grid, and if we had a smart meter fitted, we're waiting for it, we would have gotten paid for that, but we don't, so move on with our life. But here at one stage we were even exporting 1.62 kilowatts on the 16th of December, which just goes to show even in winter you can get serious payback out of these things. You can then, as mentioned, drill down a little bit more deeply and look at how much energy you use and where. And it's interesting to see we use 176 kilowatt hours of hot water, which, if you think about it, 176 divided by 31 days, so that's 5.6 kilowatt hours of electricity per day on average. it's not crazy, it's not terrible. You'll see in a later video where we go through our bathroom renovation, the measures I've taken with flow restrictors and the like to kind of limit our hot water consumption. I think a lot of the water consumption we're seeing, our energy on hot water generation, is also wastage due to just the temperature dropping off in the tank, which I'll show you in the app in a second. But it just gives grounds of reference. 312 kilowatt hours of electricity for the car. So 312.9 divided by 31, that's 10 kilowatt hours on average per day. So I don't know, I think our car does 15 kilowatt hours for 100 kilometers. So we're probably doing 80 kilometers a day, 75, 80. So it just gives a sense of where your electricity is going. And then the remainder, 433, is background loads, lighting, laptops, cooking. We do induction cooking. We do, normal oven, electric oven. So that's the remainder of our electricity. So 433 divided by 31 is 13 kilowatt hours per day. The refrigerator as well, I find, is a big load there. Clothes washing, things like that. So it's just kind of interesting. You can kind of get a sense for where you're using your electricity. And even if you look here, we had visitors staying with us over Christmas. So we're obviously cooking a lot more food, and you can just kind of see the pink went up. Interesting trivia for you. And then you can click in here and see charging sessions for your car. And it'll tell you in much more detail how much energy you actually put into the car. So there's a lot of data there in the My Energy system. We found it very positive, although in actual terms, we have found the app more useful. So let me just switch to that. And it gives a nice mimic of what the energy flows are. So we have 0.3 kilowatts, so 300 watts in use in the house at the moment. So laptops, refrigerator, lighting, mechanical heat recovery, ventilation fans, things like that are in use here, Wi-Fi routers, and that is solely being served from the grid. And then down the bottom here, now it's, I don't know, 10 to 5 on a January evening. There's no electricity being generated from PV, but then I'll put up on an image of what it looks like when it's actually generating PV. So down the bottom right is your solar PV, and you can in fact click into that and get a sense of what your daily PV generation has been. So today was 2 kilowatt hours. Pretty meager, if I'm honest. I've seen far better. Yesterday was quite a good day for early January, very clear day, and we generated 11.2 kilowatt hours, which is quite a good take. It's one of the better takes I've seen since we've had the system operational. It was obviously a very clear day, and you can just see by the absolute clarity of the curve how effective it was. And 11.2 kilowatt hours, and I think what's peak rate electricity at the moment, 30 cent. So that's what, €3-4, something like that. That's not bad at all. Yeah. Then the bottom left, you have your hot water. So this is the unit the area we installed back in episode 1. And what I find interesting here is you can see the approximate temperature in the tank. So you can see overnight that the temperature was gradually dropping. So that's just the heat dissipating through the insulation. So there's thin enough insulation, factory insulation, but thin enough insulation on that thing, and that's just wastage there. And then you can see at 6 a.m. We've the schedule set to boost it up while we're still in night rate electricity. You can see it dropped down again. A shower was used, and then you can see it dropped over the day, and then with excess solar electricity, it charged back up again. So it works out quite effectively. And then you can click in deeper into the app, and you can see the current temperature. You can boost it manually if you wish, or you can set up your schedules there. And if you don't have a schedule set up, and there is excess PV, it will charge itself up anyway. And that's something we have found very useful with this whole PV journey. And then with the car charger, so we bought a My Energy Zappi car charger so that it would work in this entire ecosystem very well, and we can set priorities between the hot water and the car charger when there's excess. So you can set normal schedules for when you want it charged up, and then you can also manually boost it if you want. And what I find quite useful then is when there's excess solar electricity, you can decide if you want one thing to charge up first. So in this case, we have the car will charge first and then the hot water, because the way we figure it, we use so little electricity on hot water, just no problem paying for that on night rate, versus the car charging we use approximately twice per day. So we use 5 kilowatt hours per day on hot water. We use 10 on average per day on car charging. So it's better if the car's plugged in to charge it first and then to do the hot water. But you can change that priority just by, you can either, if you drag one on top of the other, it'll split it evenly and charge them simultaneously. Or you can then separate out the hot water and have it charge up the cylinder first and then do the car charger. So it's quite flexible in that respect, which I find very useful. And that's roughly speaking the My Energy app. You generally also get an app with your PV inverter. In my case, it's Solace Cloud. It's effective. It works. It tells you we're generating exactly 7 watts of electricity, and it's a 4 kilowatt, that should be 4.1, 4 kilowatt installed system. But you kind of get trivia on it, and it'll tell you if there's any alarms or door overcurrents or things like that. I personally don't find that as useful as what you get with the My Energy integrated ecosystem. So yeah, in use it has worked out to be quite effective, and we're probably going to just look at the numbers a bit and get a sense of when we will buy a battery and how big it'll be, based on what our, roughly speaking, consistent nighttime consumption is, and that will guide us to say what the best kind of battery size to install is. So let's have a look at what impact this all had on our A-rated journey to get to an A, B, or rating. Right, so we'll click in to our existing dwelling here, and if I understand correctly, I need to click in. So, and for context, we're currently in F at 406.9 kilowatt hours per square meter per year. I'm an amateur at this. I'm just poking at numbers, but this is my guesstimate of where we are. So we'll click into renewables, and we'll click in that renewable number 1 is electrical, and we'll write in here that it is in fact solar PV, and here we have to put in some information which we have to get. So how to calculate this correctly is you go to SEAI DApp manual, and I have a little calculator here that you have to follow. And where it is in this manual. Where do I see it? Yeah, Appendix M. So the electricity produced by the PV module in kilowatts per year is 0.8 by kilowatt peak installed by S by Z PV. So there's a little formula I have to go through. We know what kWp is. 0.8 is quite evident. It looks like a scalar factor. S we have to take from some table that they have in the document, table H2, and then ZPV is the overshading factor from table H3. So let's have a look. Let's first of all open up a calculator and multiply 0.8 multiplied by 4.1. So far we're at 3.28. That's obviously a D-rate factor. Okay, and then let's look for table H2. be. Yeah, here we are. And what this does is they have a standardized annual solar radiation in kilowatt hours per meter squared, depending on the tilt of your collector and the orientation of the collector. And it's a shame they didn't do this in kind of one of those color charts, but our roof is at a 30-degree pitch angle and we are juice out, and that is the best number possible. We could have gone up to 45 degrees and not seen much of an impact, but as soon as you deviate from the norm, you can see it starts to drop off, but it's still by no means an issue. You're still going to get a lot out of it. So we have to multiply our sum by 1074, and then it said to look at your overshading factor, and we have no overshading. There are no trees taller than the house. So for the crack, we'll multiply that by 1. So either way, we come up with a number of 3522.72 kilowatt hours per year is what we'll generate. And it's happy enough for us to put that in both 3522.72. And let's see, first of all, does it accept that? Yeah, it does. And you can see that this is our first letter change. We went from F down to E2, and our energy value went down to 347 kilowatt hours per meter squared per year. So we're on the road to making improvements. Now the major improvements will come when we start to upgrade the building fabric and we replace the Seveso site of an oil boiler with something a lot smarter. But this is showing a lot of improvement. So thank you very much for watching. If you have any comments or queries, or you're doing this similar journey yourselves and you want to ask any questions, please let me know in the commentary below. I'll endeavor to answer as many questions as I can, and I'll see you in the next video. Thank you very much for watching. Goodbye.